Trapped in a train station, she is helped by a stranger, not imagining that he is a millionaire who would fall in love with her, and in a simple act, he would change her life. You can't miss the ending of this story. Subscribe to the channel and comment on what time you watch our videos. Now let's go to today's very exciting story. The rain was falling lightly over the city when Amelia hurriedly got off the bus. The cold wind cut through her skin, and she pulled her thin coat against her body, feeling the fatigue weighing on her shoulders. Her shoes were damp, the backpack on her back felt heavier than ever, and her racing heart reflected the anxiety, growing with each passing second. She looked at the huge digital clock above the ticket office of the train station. Only 5 minutes remained until the last train departed, her only train. With a surge of despair, she ran down the platform, dodging people, luggage and staff wrapping up their shifts. Her chest burned from running, her lungs cried out for air, but she couldn't stop, not now. As soon as she reached the boarding gate, everything around her seemed to slow down. The tracks vibrated, a whistle sounded loudly in the air, and before her wide eyes, the train began to move. "No, wait!" she shouted, trying to catch someone's attention, but it was too late. The cars slid along the tracks, moving further and further away. She stopped, breathless, watching the red lights on the back of the train disappear into the darkness of the night. The impact of reality hit her like a punch. Her stomach churned, and she ran her hand through her wet hair, feeling despair seep into her mind. Without that train, how would she get to the job interview the next morning? She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to think. There was no other train available. The bus tickets were already sold out, and the ride-sharing apps indicated outrageous prices, money she simply didn't have. The nearest hotel was also out of the question. Her savings barely covered the month's expenses. With a trembling sigh, she looked around, trying to find a solution. That's when a male voice sounded beside her. "Trouble?" She turned, startled. Before her stood a tall man with slightly tousled brown hair and a well-groomed beard. He wore dark clothes, a thick coat, and leather boots. His posture was relaxed, hands in pockets, and his gaze, a deep shade of brown, conveyed a strangely comforting calm. Amelia hesitated. I missed the train." Her voice came out shaky. "Seems important." The man raised an eyebrow, assessing her worried expression. She nodded. "I have a job interview tomorrow morning. That was the last train to the city." He pondered for a moment before giving a half-smile. "Maybe I can help." Amelia instinctively took a step back. "Help? What do you mean?" "I'm driving to a nearby city where there's a bus terminal. There might still be an option for you." She furrowed her brow. Accepting help from a stranger? That seemed crazy. But what else could she do? The man seemed to notice her hesitation. "Look, I don't want to scare you. My name is Jacob. I'm just offering an alternative in case you need it." Amelia bit her lip, weighing her options. Every minute lost decreased her chances of making it on time. With a sigh, she made her decision. "All right, but just to the bus terminal." "Agreed." They crossed the station parking lot and stopped beside a discreet black car, but clearly well-maintained. Jacob unlocked the doors, and Amelia got in, feeling the woodsy scent of the car's interior. As they hit the road, the initial silence was broken by light conversation. "And this job seems important to you?" Amelia rested her head against the seat, watching the raindrops on the window. "It's my best chance in a long time. I have experience, but opportunities are rare. If I make it, I can help my family get out of a bind." Jacob kept his eyes on the road, but something in his expression changed slightly. "Looks like you carry a heavy weight on your shoulders." She laughed without humor. "Who doesn't carry one, right?" The conversation flowed naturally. He spoke little about himself, but showed genuine interest in her. He asked about her dreams, her likes, her ambitions. With each answer, Amelia felt the initial tension ease. There was something about Jacob that made her feel at ease, even without knowing him well. But then, in the middle of the deserted road, something unexpected happened. The car shuddered slightly. Then there was a sharp crack. "What was that?" Amelia asked, alarmed. Jacob frowned and slowed down. "I think we have a problem." He pulled over to the shoulder, got out of the car, and opened the hood. The light from the headlamp illuminated his focused face as he examined the engine. Amelia got out too, hugging herself to protect against the cold wind. "What now?" "It doesn't seem serious, but we'll need help." He closed the hood and grabbed his phone. "There's an inn a few kilometers from here. We can try to get a mechanic there." The thought of spending the night in an unknown place with a man she had just met should have put her on alert. But strangely, that was not what she felt. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the calm way Jacob handled the situation, but something told her that this night still held surprises. In the distance, lightning illuminated the dark sky. Amelia took a deep breath, feeling her heart race. Little did she know that this simple delay was about to change her life forever. The rain grew heavier as Jacob and Amelia walked along the deserted road. The wind cut through the skin, and the sound of heavy drops hitting the asphalt echoed through the silence of the night. Amelia huddled inside her thin coat, her arms crossed against the cold as she looked around, trying to find any sign of the inn Jacob had mentioned. "Are you sure we are going in the right direction?" she asked, her voice slightly trembling. Jacob, who was walking a little ahead, nodded. "Yes, it's close. I remember the sign. It should be about 10 minutes from here." Amelia huffed, kicking a small pebble on the wet road. "Great! In the middle of a storm, in the dark, with a stranger. What could go wrong?" Jacob chuckled softly, turning to face her. "Do you think I'm dangerous?" She raised an eyebrow. I'm still not sure," he smirked, his gaze filled with a contained humor. "Well, if that comforts you, I'm terrible at fighting and have an irrational fear of spiders." Amelia couldn't help but let out a small laugh. It was strange how he managed to make her feel at ease, even in that situation. Suddenly, Jacob stopped, raising one hand. "Look over there!" Amelia followed his gaze, and in the distance saw the silhouette of a small building with yellow lights flickering at the entrance. The sign, an already aged board, indicated that they had arrived. Finally. She sighed with relief. They quickly crossed the road and pushed open the inn's door, greeted by a bell that chimed above the entrance. The atmosphere was simple, with rustic wooden furniture and a small reception area. The smell of fresh coffee lingered in the air. A middle-aged man with graying hair and a watchful expression stood up from a chair behind the counter. "Good evening. It seems you got caught in the rain, huh?" "Something like that." Jacob stepped closer, resting one hand on the counter. "Do you have any rooms available?" The receptionist picked up an old notebook and flipped through. A few pages. "I have 2 rooms. One upstairs, quite cozy. The other," he hesitated, "is simpler, with no window and a somewhat unstable bed." Before Amelia could speak, Jacob gave a slight smile. "Take the better one, Amelia. I'll take the other." She blinked, surprised. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." Amelia hesitated for a moment but accepted. As they climbed the stairs, she felt a different weight on her chest. Since the moment she had met Jacob, he had been courteous and helpful, with no suspicious attitude. Most men would have tried to take advantage of the situation, but he seemed different. Not long after, already changed into dry clothes and wrapped in a blanket, Amelia looked out the bedroom window. The storm was raging outside, lightning illuminating the dark sky. Her body was exhausted, but her mind was restless. The day had been chaotic. The despair at the station, the risky decision to accept the ride, the car breaking down in the middle of nowhere. Everything pointed to a succession of bad events. But somehow, there was something different about that night. A light knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She hesitated before opening. Jacob was there, wearing a dark sweatshirt and slightly tousled hair. The owner of the inn improvised a dinner in the kitchen since the power is out. I thought you might want to eat something. Amelia smiled, feeling an unexpected wave of gratitude. That sounds great. They went down together and found the small kitchen lit only by candles. The innkeeper had prepared a simple dish of hot soup and fresh bread, and the two sat at the wooden table. So, Amelia began, blowing on the soup spoon before bringing it to her mouth. You haven't told me much about yourself. What were you doing at the train station at this hour? Jacob held the coffee cup between his fingers, thoughtful. I was coming back from a business trip. My plan was to catch a train home, but I ended up changing my mind at the last minute. She frowned. Why? He raised his eyes to hers, a slight smile at the corner of his lips. Let's just say I decided to take a different path. Amelia noticed that he avoided talking about his personal life. Still, the way his eyes watched her gave her the feeling that he was not just another stranger. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. On the contrary, it carried a weight that Amelia could not explain. When the plates were empty, Jacob moved away from the table, reaching for a candle. Since we're without power, how about we take advantage of the old-fashioned lighting? She smiled. What do you suggest? He picked up one of the candles and walked to the inn's covered porch, where the cold wind blew lightly. Amelia hesitated for a moment before following him. The flickering candlelight cast soft shadows on his face, highlighting his strong features and serene expression. I enjoy nights like this, he said, watching the rain fall beyond the porch. When the world slows down. Amelia crossed her arms, hugging herself to shield against the cold. I usually feel restless. I hate when things are out of my control. Jacob looked at her, a curious glimmer in his eyes. Maybe some things need to get out of control to take us where we need to be? She swallowed hard. Why did she feel he was talking about more than just that night? The wind blew harder, and instinctively, Jacob took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. Amelia lifted her face, meeting his gaze. It was at that moment she realized something. Until then, Jacob had been an unexpected travel companion, someone who appeared amid the chaos. But there, under the dim candlelight, she saw a mysterious man, full of nuances she still did not understand. Her heart raced. She had no idea that this connection was just beginning. The cold wind cut through the night as Amelia remained on the balcony beside Jacob. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, but heavy with something she couldn't name. The raindrops decreased, touching the wooden roof with a soft and hypnotic rhythm. The candle flickered on the table beside them, casting wavering shadows on their faces. Jacob still held the coat over Amelia's shoulders, as if he wanted to protect her, not only from the cold, but from something invisible. His gaze wandered across the cloudy sky, thoughtful. "Do you always travel alone?" she asked, trying to break the silence. He tilted his head slightly, a half-smile forming on his lips. "Almost always. I like to observe places without distractions." Amelia raised an eyebrow. "And am I a distraction?" Jacob let out a low laugh but did not respond immediately. Instead, he turned to her, his eyes heavy with something indecipherable. "You are not the kind of distraction that can be ignored." She felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold wind. She forced herself to look away, focusing on the landscape around. The dark road, the distant sound of a stream running through the trees. Everything seemed different now. "And you?" Jacob continued. "Have you ever thought about leaving everything behind and traveling aimlessly?" Amelia let out a humorless laugh. "I can barely pay my bills, let alone wander around aimlessly." He watched her for a moment, as if he were trying to decipher something within her. Money is not the only obstacle to freedom. She frowned. What do you mean? Jacob hesitated for a moment before answering. Sometimes we hold on to things we think we need, but that actually prevent us from moving forward. Amelia fell silent, digesting those words. He was right in a way. She had spent her entire life trying to meet expectations, supporting her family, struggling to be recognized. But deep down, something within her always wanted more, something she never had the courage to admit. I guess I never had a choice. Her voice was softer than she intended. Jacob tilted his head as if he wanted to say something, but before he could respond, the innkeeper appeared at the door. The mechanic will arrive in the morning. Looks like you'll have to spend the night here. Amelia sighed, feeling the weariness weigh on her. Jacob thanked the man with a nod and then turned to her. I think this is our cue to try to rest. She nodded. Good night, Jacob. He smiled slightly. Good night, Amelia. Amelia woke in the middle of the night. The room plunged into a silent gloom. The storm had passed, leaving only the distant sound of crickets and the gentle wind swaying the trees. She turned in bed, trying to settle down to sleep again, but something bothered her. Her chest felt restless, as if a strange energy were trapped inside her. She got up, grabbing the coat, and walked to the hallway. The wooden floor creaked under her feet as she carefully descended the stairs. Upon reaching the ground floor, she saw a weak light coming from the balcony. Jacob was there, sitting in a rocking chair, a steaming cup in his hands. Amelia hesitated for a moment before approaching. Can't sleep? She asked softly. Jacob lifted his eyes to her and smiled wryly. There are nights made for staying awake. She pulled up a chair and sat beside him, watching the tranquil darkness of the road. What are you thinking about? Jacob spun the cup between his fingers, as if pondering his words. About destiny, about how much life can change in an instant. Amelia sighed. Do you believe in destiny? He turned to her, his eyes shining under the dim light. And you? She was silent for a moment before responding. I believe that some things happen for a reason, but we don't always know what that reason is at the time. Jacob smiled faintly. I think we agree on that. The silence between them felt different now, denser. Amelia felt a wave of nervousness grow within her. Something about Jacob made her feel safe and, at the same time, vulnerable, and as if he could see parts of her that she herself avoided facing. When I left home today, all I wanted was to make it to the interview. She laughed without humor. But now... She didn't finish the sentence. Jacob leaned slightly forward, his eyes locked on hers. Now? Amelia swallowed hard. Now I'm not sure of anything. He didn't look away. And does that scare you? She hesitated, then nodded. Jacob sighed and rested his arms on his knees, leaning forward. Sometimes, the best things in life happen when we allow ourselves to be uncertain. Amelia felt her heart race. Something was changing there, something she hadn't anticipated. She didn't know that this night still held more secrets, and that from that moment on, her life would never be the same. The early morning was advancing slowly, and Amelia still felt the warmth of the conversation, with Jacob burning inside her. Something in the way he looked at her, in the depth of his words, seemed to cross all the barriers she normally erected around herself. He did not ask too much, did not force anything, just let the words come up at the right moment, but there was something about him that she still could not decipher. The mystery intrigued her as much as it frightened her. After a while in silence, they both returned to their rooms. Amelia tried to sleep, but her mind was spinning around everything that had happened since she missed that train. She could not explain why, but she felt that Jacob was not just any traveler. The day dawned wrapped in a grey tone, remnants of the storm from the previous night still visible in the puddles of water scattered across the lodge's dirt floor. Amelia came down the stairs yawning and found Jacob already sitting at the kitchen table, having coffee and reading something on his phone. "Good morning," he said upon seeing her. "Good morning." She took a cup and served herself. The strong, hot coffee, feeling the aroma awaken her senses. "Any news about the car?" "The mechanic is already out there. He should finish the repair soon." Amelia nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. She was eager to continue her journey, but at the same time she did not want that journey to end so quickly. "If everything goes well, you'll still make it in time for your interview." She raised her eyes to him. "That's if they still take me in." Jacob smiled slightly. "I have a hunch that you will make it." Amelia furrowed her brow. "Why are you so sure of that?" He just shrugged, but something in his expression seemed to hide a greater meaning. The car was ready in less than an hour. Amelia and Jacob said goodbye to the lodge owner, thanked him for his hospitality, and continued their journey. The drive was smooth, but there was a different silence between them now, as if something hung in the air, unspoken, unexplored. A certain moment, Jacob turned on the radio and a soft music filled the space. He lightly tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, distracted, while Amelia looked out the window, lost in thoughts. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Breaking the silence, she hesitated before answering. "How a single setback can change everything." Jacob cast her a quick glance before returning his eyes to the road. "Sometimes missing a train is the best thing that can happen to us." Amelia smiled slightly. "You really believe that, don't you?" He nodded. "I believe that everything has a reason. We just don't always see it at the moment." She remained silent, reflecting on that. After all, could that delay really have a greater purpose? When they finally arrived in the city, Amelia felt her stomach churn with anxiety. Jacob parked in front of the building where her interview would take place and looked at her. "Ready?" She let out a sigh and tried to smile. "I think so." Before getting out of the car, Amelia turned to him. "Jacob, I just wanted to thank you. You really didn't have to do any of this for me." He looked at her for a moment, his eyes fixed on hers. "Maybe I did." She frowned, intrigued by the answer, but he just smiled as if he knew something she did not yet understand. Amelia took a deep breath and got out of the car, walking determinedly to the building's reception. What she did not expect was that, in a few minutes, she would discover something that would completely change her view of Jacob and everything that had happened up to that point. Amelia crossed the reception of the building with quick steps, feeling her heart racing. She was still dazed by the events of the last few hours. Her mind was trying to focus on the interview, but deep down, a part of her remained stuck on the road, at the inn, on the candlelit night, and on Jacob's mysterious words. The receptionist looked at her curiously as she approached. "Good morning. Can I help you?" Amelia cleared her throat and adjusted her damp hair from the rain the night before. "I had an interview scheduled for earlier, but I missed the train. I tried to reschedule, but I couldn't get in touch. My name is Amelia." The woman analyzed the computer screen and smiled. "Ah, yes, your interview has been rescheduled. The director asked to fit you in at the last time slot of the morning." Amelia blinked, surprised. "Really? But how?" "He said it would be a waste to lose a promising candidate over a setback." Amelia felt a shiver run down her spine. That interview was extremely competitive, and any delay typically meant automatic disqualification. And yet, someone had intervened to give her a second chance. But who? She thanked the receptionist and was led to an elegant waiting room where other people were waiting. Some were flipping through resumes, others were nervously looking at their phones. Amelia took her own portfolio and clutched it to her chest, trying to stay calm. She needed that position. She took a deep breath and focused, mentally reviewing her answers, her experiences, her strengths. Time passed quickly, and soon an assistant came to call her. "Amelia, please follow me." Nervousness escalated as she walked down the shiny corridor. Her chest rose and fell with controlled breaths, trying to contain the anxiety. The assistant opened the door and stepped aside for her to enter the interview room. Amelia took 2 steps inside and froze. Sitting at the conference table, impeccably dressed, Jacob was looking at her with a contained smile. She felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The silence in the room was almost palpable. Amelia blinked several times, trying to absorb what she was seeing. Her heart pounded in her chest, and the only thing she could do was stare at Jacob in shock. But he seemed calm, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "Amelia." His voice sounded firm, but with a slight playful tone. "I'm glad you made it on time." She looked around, realizing they were not alone. There were 2 other serious-looking men at the table, probably directors of the company. Amelia tried to catch her breath. "You—" Her voice faltered, so she cleared her throat and tried again. "Do you work here?" Jacob smiled, crossing his fingers on the table. "I'm one of the main shareholders of the company." Amelia felt her stomach drop. The pieces started to fit together in her mind. The way Jacob had managed to reschedule her interview. The way he spoke about fate, about unexpected changes. The quiet confidence he exuded, even wearing casual clothes. The night before, she ran a hand over her face, trying to organize her thoughts. "Did you know who I was from the start?" Jacob tilted his head, assessing her. "I knew when I heard your name at the station. I saw your profile among the candidates and recognized you." Amelia blinked, dazed. "And you said nothing?" "I wanted to get to know you outside of here." He kept his gaze fixed on hers. "I wanted to see who you really were, without the weight of the interview, without the formalities of the company." Amelia felt indignation mix with the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "Isn't that wrong? You basically tested me before the interview." One of the directors cleared his throat. "We can assure you that the selection is made fairly. Mr. Jacob does not interfere with the direct processes. He merely observes." Amelia felt her face flush. She didn't know if she was angry, surprised, or simply perplexed. "So, what happens now?" Jacob maintained his composure, but there was something in the shine of his eyes that indicated he had already expected that reaction. "Now, you will interview just like any other candidate." He gestured for her to sit. "Let's see if you are worthy of the position." Amelia clenched her fists for a second, trying to contain the avalanche of feelings. Then she took a deep breath, sat down and lifted her chin. If Jacob wanted to see her prove her worth, that was exactly what she would do. The interview was intense. The directors asked challenging questions, testing her knowledge and her improvisation skills. Amelia maintained her firm posture, her mind sharp with each answer, and throughout the whole time she felt Jacob's gaze on her. He did not intervene. He gave no signals of favoritism. He only watched, attentive. When the interview was over, one of the directors closed the folder and smiled. "Excellent performance, Amelia. We will contact you soon with our decision." She thanked him and stood up, feeling her whole body tense. Jacob also stood up but said nothing as the other directors left. It was only when they were alone that he approached. "You did very well." Amelia crossed her arms, still trying to understand how she felt about him. "I don't know if I should feel flattered or irritated by all this." Jacob smiled slightly. "You can feel both," she huffed, shaking her head. "You are unbelievable." "I know." Amelia stared at him for a moment. There were still many questions, many doubts about what it all meant. But at that moment, one thing was certain. Her life had just changed forever. Amelia left the building with hurried steps, feeling her heart still pounding in her chest. The fresh air outside helped her catch her breath, but her mind was still in turmoil. She stopped on the sidewalk, closed her eyes for a moment, and tried to process everything that had just happened. Jacob. He was one of the company's shareholders, the man with whom she had shared a rainy night on the road, who had driven for hours to help her, who had listened to her insecurities around a candlelit table. He was one of the most influential names in that building. She felt a mix of disbelief and irritation. How could he hide something like that? Amelia looked around, trying to decide where to go. She needed some time to organize her thoughts, but before she could move, she heard the voice she was already beginning to recognize effortlessly. "Do you always leave in a hurry after interviews, or is it just with me?" She turned sharply and found Jacob standing near the entrance of the building. He held his jacket over one shoulder, his posture relaxed, but his eyes still attentive, assessing her every expression. Amelia crossed her arms. "Tell me something, Jacob. Do you always leave people thinking you're just some guy before revealing that, in fact, you're an influential millionaire?" He smiled slightly. "Not always, but I thought that this time it was worth it." She let out an incredulous laugh and shook her head. "Do you find that funny?" Jacob took a few steps toward her, maintaining a calm expression. "I don't find it funny. I just wanted to get to know you without you knowing who I am." Amelia narrowed her eyes. "That seems very convenient." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck as if choosing his words carefully. "It wasn't a game, Amelia. I wasn't testing you. I just wanted a moment when someone looked at me without the weight of my last name or my money." The sincerity in his voice made her heart falter for a second, but the irritation still hadn't completely faded away. "And now, what does that mean?" Jacob tilted his head slightly. "That depends on you." Amelia opened her mouth to respond, but something inside her hesitated. She still didn't know what to think of him. She only knew that she couldn't simply ignore what she felt. The following days were an emotional roller coaster. Amelia went home and spent hours reliving every detail of what had happened. She tried to convince herself that it was just a random encounter of fate, something fleeting that would soon dissipate over time. But then came the phone call. "Amelia?" The voice of the director sounded firm on the other end of the line. "We want to welcome you to the team." She held her breath. I got the position. "Yes, your performance was impeccable. We look forward to working with you." Amelia hung up, still in shock. She had done it. The job she had fought so hard for was now hers. But what did that mean in relation to Jacob? The first day at work was intense. She was introduced to the team, received instructions, and dove headfirst into the new responsibilities. She made sure to stay focused, to show that she was there on her own merit. And then, at the end of the afternoon, while finishing up reviewing some documents, she felt a chill go down her spine upon hearing a familiar voice. "How's your first day going?" Amelia looked up and found Jacob standing in the doorway of the room. He was wearing an impeccable suit, but there was something relaxed about his posture, as if he were there without any formality. She took a deep breath and calmly replied, "Busy, but good." Jacob smiled slightly. "I'm glad to hear that." There was a brief silence between the two. Then he leaned a bit forward, resting against the doorframe. "And what about what happened between us?" Amelia looked away for a moment. "I'm still trying to understand." He nodded, as if he had been expecting that answer. "Let me make it easier." She raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Jacob kept his hands in his pockets and smiled. "Let's have dinner, just the two of us." Amelia opened her mouth, ready to refuse, But something inside her hesitated. If there was one thing that this experience had taught her, it was that some opportunities only come once, and maybe, just maybe, Jacob was one of those opportunities. She held his gaze for a moment before responding, "All right, let's have dinner." Jacob smiled, and at that moment, Amelia knew her life was about to change even more. Amelia spent the rest of the day trying to ignore the knot in her stomach that always came when she thought about dinner with Jacob. Since starting her new job, she had made it a point to maintain absolute focus on work. She wanted to prove that she had earned her position on her own merit, that she did not depend on anyone. But the truth was that Jacob continued to be an enigma in her life, and now, with that unexpected invitation, she felt that something was about to change. When she arrived at the restaurant, Amelia immediately felt out of place. The atmosphere was sophisticated, with soft lights reflecting off crystal glasses, elegantly set tables, and a refined silence that was only broken by the discreet murmur of the clientele. She had never been in such a place before. She adjusted the simple dress she had chosen and took a deep breath. Jacob was already there, sitting at a table near the window. When he saw her, he stood up with a smile on his face. "I thought you might not come." Amelia forced a smile. "And I thought I might be making a mistake." Jacob raised an eyebrow, entertained. "And are you?" She bit her lip, hesitating before answering. "I'm still not sure." He smiled, pulling out a chair for her to sit. The waiter appeared quickly, and Jacob ordered a wine. Amelia watched as he spoke naturally, completely comfortable in that environment. It was as if he belonged to that world, while she was still trying to figure out if she had a place there. When the waiter stepped away, Jacob rested his elbows on the table and looked at her. "Why do you think being here is a mistake?" Amelia fiddled with the edge of her napkin, not looking him directly in the eye. "Because you and I come from completely different worlds." He didn't answer immediately. He just observed her for a moment before saying, "You're right. We are different." She raised her eyes, surprised by the answer. Jacob continued, "But that doesn't mean we shouldn't explore what that might mean." Amelia let out a sigh. "Jacob, I'm a woman who has spent her whole life fighting for every small achievement. I didn't grow up surrounded by luxury. I haven't dined in places like this. I'm not used to this." He leaned slightly forward. "And you think that matters to me?" She fell silent. "Amelia, from the moment I met you, I saw in you something that few people have. You are determined, intelligent, passionate about what you do. None of that has to do with money?" Amelia felt her heart race. Why did he always know exactly what to say? The waiter brought the wine, and Jacob poured the glasses calmly. "If you want to know the truth," he said after taking a sip, "I envy you." Amelia blinked, surprised. "What?" He lightly spun the glass between his fingers. "You have something I lost a long time ago. You see life with a genuine purpose. I grew up surrounded by privileges, but that also means I grew up surrounded by expectations. Everything I do is analyzed, calculated." Amelia tilted her head. "You seem to handle it well." Jacob chuckled softly. "I learned to hide what I really feel." Amelia felt a tightness in her chest. For the first time, she saw something different in his expression. Something vulnerable. "And what do you feel now?" she asked, her voice softer. Jacob looked at her for a moment before answering that maybe for the first time in a long time, "I'm doing something simply because I want to." The air between them changed. The tension that had lingered in the atmosphere was no longer uncomfortable, but charged with something new, something they were both trying to understand. The dinner continued with lighter conversations. Amelia began to relax, laughing at Jacob's funny stories about his childhood. about how he used to skip etiquette classes to play soccer in the street. And then, when dessert was served, Jacob leaned back in his chair and said something that made Amelia's heart stop for a second. "I want to show you a place." She frowned. "Now?" He nodded. "Now." Amelia hesitated for a moment, but curiosity won. "All right." Shortly after, they were in the car, driving through the city's illuminated streets. Jacob drove calmly, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on his thigh. "Where are we going?" Amelia asked, trying to decipher the streets around them. "You'll see." The car left the city centre behind and took a more secluded road. Amelia watched the landscape change, the lights becoming sparser until they finally reached a discreet gate. Jacob typed a code on the panel, and the gate opened. Amelia felt her breath falter when she saw what was on the other side. A country house, but not just any house. It was a charming building, surrounded by tall trees and an immaculate garden. The moon reflected on the surface of a lake right in front, and the fresh air brought the scent of pure nature. Amelia looked at Jacob, confused. "What is this place?" He smiled slightly. "It's my home, or at least the only place where I really feel at home." She remained silent, absorbing that information. Jacob got out of the car and opened the door for her. "I want to show you something." She hesitated before following him. They walked to a small porch with a bonfire in the center, casting an orange glow on the dark wood. Amelia wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the comforting warmth of the fire. "I come here when I need to remember who I really am," Jacob said, looking at the lake. "Here, I'm not a shareholder. I'm not a businessman. I'm just me." Amelia watched him closely. Then, for the first time, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. Behind the confidence and impeccable posture, Jacob carried a silent loneliness. And at that moment, she felt she was exactly where she was meant to be. The campfire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the wooden porch. The silence around was almost absolute, interrupted only by the rustling of trees and the distant sound of crickets in the cool night. Amelia remained there, feeling the warmth of the fire warming her skin as her mind tried to process everything she was experiencing. Jacob was sitting beside her, his gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the lake. "When I was a child, I used to come here with my mother," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Whenever things got complicated, she would say that this was a refuge." Amelia turned to him, surprised by that sudden openness. "And why did it get complicated?" Jacob let out a deep sigh before answering. "My father was not an easy man. He wanted me to be a copy of him, a cold, calculating businessman. For him, feelings were weakness. But my mother was the opposite. She believed I could be anything, as long as I was happy." Amelia felt a tightness in her chest upon hearing that. What happened to her? Jacob closed his eyes for a moment before answering. "She died when I was 20. Cancer." Amelia held her breath. "Jacob, I'm so sorry." He smiled faintly, but it was a sad smile. "After she left, this house remained closed for a long time. I couldn't go back. It was as if every corner here still had her presence, but at the same time, it felt empty." Amelia observed his profile, illuminated by the orange glow of the fire. For the first time, she saw Jacob without the layers of mystery and control he used as armor. There on that porch, he was just a man carrying pains he had never allowed anyone to see. Without thinking much, she reached out and gently placed her hand over his. Jacob looked at the gesture, surprised, but did not pull away. "You don't have to carry everything alone," Amelia said softly. He turned to face her, and for a moment, it seemed like he was going to say something. But then, instead of words, Jacob simply held her hand firmly, as if that contact was enough to keep the ghosts of the past from pulling him down. and, in a way, it was. Time passed without either of them noticing. The fire began to die down, and the wind brought with it a cooler breeze. Jacob stood up and took a blanket that was folded over a chair, draping it over Amelia's shoulders. "It's late," he said. "You must be tired." Amelia nodded, but did not make any move to get up just yet. "I don't think I've ever had such an unexpected night like this." Jacob smirked. "I'm an expert at changing people's plans." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "I noticed." He watched her for a moment, as if he wanted to say something, but then just sighed. "Come on, I'll show you to your room." Amelia followed him inside the house, surprised by the simplicity of the setting. Despite being large, the place did not have the ostentation she expected. The furniture was cozy, made of dark wood, and every detail seemed laden with history. He opened a door in the hallway and turned on the light. "Here. It's the room my mother used to use when she wanted to be alone to read. I think you'll like it." Amelia looked around. There was an armchair by the window, a bookshelf full of books, and a wool blanket folded over the bed. The atmosphere exuded peace. She turned to him and smiled. "Thank you, Jacob." He simply nodded, but before leaving he hesitated. "Amelia?" She looked up at him. "Yes?" For a moment it seemed he wanted to say something important. But then he just smiled slightly and shook his head. "Good night." And then, without waiting for a response, he closed the door behind him. Amelia stood there for a few seconds, trying to understand what she was feeling. Something inside her told her that from that night on, nothing would ever be the same. And she was right. But she still had no idea what fate had in store for her. Amelia woke up to the soft light of dawn filtering through the curtains of the room. For a brief moment, she felt confused, not exactly remembering where she was, but then the events of the previous night flooded her mind. The campfire, Jacob's words, the way he looked at her, as if he carried within him something he had never dared to share before. She sat up in bed, running her hand through her hair, and took a deep breath. There was something about that place that made her feel different, lighter, closer to a truth that she didn't even know she was searching for. She got up and carefully opened the door, walking through the silent hallways of the house. Outside, the morning breeze was fresh, filled with the aroma of damp earth and freshly brewed coffee. Amelia followed the smell and found Jacob in the kitchen with his back to her, preparing something on the stove. He was wearing only sweatpants and a simple t-shirt, which made him seem less of a businessman and more real. He noticed her presence and gave a slight smile without turning completely. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" She leaned against the doorframe, watching him. "Yes. Better than I imagined." Jacob turned with a mug in hand and extended it to her. "Coffee?" Amelia took the cup and felt the comforting warmth of the liquid against her skin. She took a small sip, closing her eyes for a moment as the strong flavor spread through her mouth. "Perfect." Jacob smiled, as if he was satisfied with that answer. The two sat at the table, and for a moment, everything seemed incredibly normal. Just a man and a woman sharing breakfast in a quiet house, far from the weight of the world outside. But Amelia knew it wasn't that simple. "Do you always come here alone?" she asked, trying to break the silence. Jacob nodded, looking out the window. "Almost always. My father never liked this place. After my mother left, he preferred to distance himself from here. He said there was no longer any purpose in keeping this house, that I should sell it. And why didn't you sell it?" He sighed, turning the cup between his fingers. "Because this is the only place where I still feel myself." Amelia bit her lip, watching him. There was a melancholy in Jacob that she still didn't fully understand, but she wanted to understand. "And what does your father think of that?" Jacob let out a low laugh, devoid of humor. "My father thinks many things, but in the end, he only cares about what keeps his image untarnished." Amelia felt a shiver. The way Jacob spoke of his own father had a weight that went beyond disappointment. There was something more there, something he wasn't saying directly. She hesitated before asking, "Did you two fight?" He was silent for a moment, as if pondering what to answer. "Let's just say we disagree on almost everything." Amelia noticed he didn't want to go into details. She respected his space, but couldn't shake the feeling that this story was still incomplete. After breakfast, Jacob invited her to take a walk around the property. They walked through the dewy garden, following a path that led to the lake. The water reflected the light blue sky, creating a landscape that seemed untouched by time. Amelia stopped at the edge and closed her eyes, breathing in the fresh air. "I never imagined a place like this could exist," she murmured. Jacob was watching her, his hands in his pockets. "And I never imagined I would bring someone here again." She turned to him, meeting his intense gaze. "Why?" He hesitated, as if considering his answer. "Because it has always been easier to keep people at a distance." Amelia felt a lump in her throat. "And what changed?" Jacob smiled softly. "You." Amelia's heart raced. Before she could respond, Jacob stepped forward and took her hand, his fingers sliding over hers gently. "I know it doesn't make sense," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "But since I met you, I feel like something inside me finally found a way." Amelia held her breath. "Jacob." He raised his hand and gently touched her face, his eyes searching hers as if waiting for a silent permission. And Amelia realized she didn't want to run away from it anymore, so when he leaned in to kiss her, she didn't pull back. Their lips met hesitantly at first, but soon the kiss became deeper, more intense. Jacob held her waist, pulling her closer, as if he wanted to confirm that she was real, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the job, not the differences between them, not the secret still lingering in the air. All that existed was that moment. But Amelia didn't know that very soon reality would hit them like a storm, and that not everything would be as simple as it seemed. Until that moment, Amelia was trying to keep her feet on the ground, rationalizing everything she felt for Jacob. But there, with the wind blowing her hair and the warmth of his hands holding her waist, she knew she had already crossed an invisible line. When their lips parted, Jacob kept his face close to hers, his gaze fixed and intense. "Should I not have done this?" he asked, his voice husky. Amelia tried to find the right words, but all she managed was a trembling sigh. "I guess it doesn't matter anymore." Jacob smiled faintly, as if he already knew there was no turning back. The silence between them was interrupted by the persistent ringing of his cell phone. Jacob furrowed his brow, pulling the device from his pocket. When he saw the name on the screen, his expression changed. "I need to take this." He stepped back a few paces, bringing the phone to his ear. "What's up?" he said, his tone harsher than usual. Amelia couldn't hear the other person on the line, but Jacob's expression turned grim. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly tense. "This can't be happening now." His jaw clenched. "I said I would handle this later." Amelia's heart sank. Something was wrong. After a few more seconds of conversation, Jacob hung up the phone and stood still, as if trying to control his anger. "Jacob." He closed his eyes for a moment before meeting her gaze. "I need to go back to the city now." Amelia felt a knot in her stomach. "What happened?" He hesitated, clearly reluctant to speak, but then let out a frustrated sigh. My father. She frowned. What about him? He found out about you? Amelia blinked, confused. What do you mean, about me? Jacob looked at the lake for a moment before turning back to her. He discovered that you got a position at the company and that I've been spending time with you. And apparently, he didn't like that at all. Amelia's stomach twisted. But why? Jacob let out a humorless laugh. Because he thinks I should be focused on business, not on, he paused, carefully choosing his words, other matters. She felt a wave of frustration rising within her. And what can he do? Jacob ran a hand over his face, visibly tense. My father is a man used to controlling everything around him. If he sees something as an obstacle, he eliminates it. Amelia crossed her arms, feeling her blood boil. Are you saying that I'm an obstacle? Jacob's eyes widened. No, he took a step towards her. The problem isn't you, Amelia, it's him. He thinks he can decide what's best for me. It's always been like that. She fell silent, processing everything. And are you going to let this happen? Jacob closed his eyes for a moment before replying, I've never let my father decide my life, and I'm not going to start now. There was a moment of tension until Jacob sighed, but I need to resolve this. Amelia nodded slowly, feeling something dark hovering over them. I'm going with you. He hesitated. Amelia, maybe it's better. No. She interrupted him. If this involves me, I need to know what's going on. Jacob studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right, let's go. The drive back to the city was silent and tense. Jacob kept his eyes fixed on the road, his jaw clenched. Amelia felt a tightness in her chest, a bad feeling growing inside her. When they arrived at the company building, Jacob led her directly to an upper floor, where a lavish office awaited them. As soon as they entered, a man in a dark suit and a cold expression stared at them. Amelia knew immediately that this was Jacob's father. So it's you, he said, examining her from head to toe. Amelia held his gaze firmly, refusing to back down. Yes, it's me. The man crossed his arms. Do you know who my son is, what he represents? She felt anger bubbling within her. I know exactly who he is. Jacob's father let out a dry laugh. An ordinary woman, no fortune, no influence. What exactly do you think you can offer him? Amelia tightened her fists. Before she could respond, Jacob stepped forward, his voice firm. Father, enough. The man raised an eyebrow. Do you really think you can take this further? Jacob kept his gaze fixed on his father. I don't think so. I know so. There was a heavy silence in the room. Amelia felt her heart racing, but kept her posture strong. Jacob's father sighed, rubbing his temples. If you insist on this, you'll face the consequences. Jacob crossed his arms. I've always known this day would come. The man stood up and looked directly at Amelia. I hope you understand what you're getting into. She held his gaze. I know exactly what I'm getting into. There was another tense silence. Then Jacob's father took a step back and let out a resigned sigh. If this is how you want to play, then let's play. Amelia felt a chill run down her spine. That was not an empty threat, and something inside her told her that the real battle had not even begun. The silence that settled in the office was as dense as a storm about to break. Amelia felt her heart pounding in her chest, but she did not look away from Jacob's father. The man analyzed her with the coldness of someone used to being in control, but she would not back down. Jacob broke the silence. If you think you can manipulate me as you always have, you are mistaken. His father gave a sideways smile with not a hint of humor. Manipulate? I just offered you the most logical path, a life without unnecessary distractions. Amelia clenched her fists, feeling her blood boil. I am not a distraction. The man turned to her with a condescending look. My son is one of the most influential names in the market. Do you really think you belong in this world? Amelia felt a lump in her throat, but she raised her chin. I may not belong to your world, but I belong to his. Jacob reached out and took her hand, intertwining his fingers as if confirming that statement. His father watched the gesture with a gaze heavy with judgment before letting out a slow sigh. Are you willing to lose everything for this, Jacob? The answer came without hesitation. If everything means living a life that is not mine, then yes. For a moment, the man said nothing. He just observed them, as if weighing all the possibilities. Then, without another word, he took his jacket, put it on slowly, and left the room, leaving a trail of tension in the air. The weight of that conversation still hung over them, but Amelia knew something had changed. Jacob turned to her, squeezing her hand. Are you sure you want to be in this with me? She looked into his eyes, seeing there not just a powerful man, but someone who carried invisible scars, someone who, despite everything, chose love over fear. Amelia smiled slightly and nodded. I have never been so sure of anything in my life. He let out a sigh of relief and, without further hesitation, pulled her into a tight embrace. Nothing else mattered. Money, power, or threats didn't matter. All that mattered was that they were together. And that was more than enough. Time passed, but that day in the office was etched in Amelia and Jacob's memory. It was the moment. Everything became clear. They were willing to face any obstacle to be together. But the path to that moment was not easy. After the tense conversation with Jacob's father, the consequences began to surface. At first, they were subtle. Small comments in the company corridors, suspicious looks from some colleagues. Then they became more evident. Cancelled meetings, decisions made without Jacob's presence, a gradual distancing from the most important projects. His father didn't need to say anything explicitly. His power lay in actions, but Jacob was already expecting. He thinks he can suffocate me until I give up, he said one night while they were sitting on the couch in Amelia's small apartment. She held his hand firmly. And what are you going to do? Jacob sighed, running his hand through his hair. I don't know yet, but I know what I won't do. What? He looked her in the eyes. I won't give up on you. Amelia smiled, feeling her heart warm. A few weeks later, the situation reached a new level. Jacob's father called an extraordinary meeting with the company's board. The goal was clear: to distance him from important decisions, to reduce his influence. But Jacob was not a novice. He knew exactly how that game was played. At the meeting, while his father presented arguments about strategic reorganization, Jacob calmly stood up and placed his own letter on the table. I was expecting this, he said, looking his father in the eyes. So I took my own measures. Everyone in the room exchanged confused glances. Jacob's father crossed his arms. And what does that mean? Jacob smiled calmly. It means I sold my share in the company. An absolute silence fell over the room. His father's face went pale, as if he couldn't process the information. What? You heard me right. I sold my stake. And before you ask, no, it wasn't to any of your allies. Jacob's father took a deep breath, clearly furious. You're throwing away everything you built. Jacob looked directly at him. No, I'm just rejecting a life that isn't mine. It was a shock to everyone. In a few days, news that Jacob had left the company spread. Many thought he was making a mistake. Others thought he had gone crazy. But Amelia knew the truth. He was finally free. And for the first time, Jacob seemed at peace with his decision. The following months were a time of reconstruction. Amelia continued to work hard at the company, proving her worth day by day. Without Jacob's shadow there, some people doubted her competence at first, but she showed everyone that she was there because she deserved to be. And Jacob? He used his knowledge and influence to start his own business, away from the old family company. He created a consultancy to help small and medium-sized businesses grow without the pressure of large corporations. "I've never felt so fulfilled," he said one day while they were walking in the park. "And for the first time, I'm doing something that really matters to me." Amelia smiled, intertwining her fingers with his. "And you're amazing at it." He pulled her into a tight embrace. "And you? How are you?" She sighed, thinking for a moment. "Happy. Tired, but happy." Jacob laughed. "That sums up adulthood well." They fell silent for a moment, just enjoying each other's presence. Then Jacob held her hand tighter and said something that made Amelia's heart race. "I want to show you something." The car drove through familiar roads. When Amelia realized where they were going, she felt a tightening in her chest. The country house. It was nighttime when they arrived. The porch was illuminated by lanterns, and the lake reflected the full moon. Jacob parked the car, but didn't get out immediately. He turned to Amelia, pulling something from his pocket. When he opened his hand, a silver key glimmered in the dim light. "What is this?" she asked, her heart racing. Jacob smiled. "I want this place to be yours too." Amelia felt her eyes fill with tears. "Jacob, I know we don't need grand gestures or promises, but this house, it has always been my refuge, and now I want it to be ours." She looked at the key in her hand and then at him. Then she smiled. "I accept." Jacob cupped her face with both hands and kissed her with all the intensity of the moment. In that instant, Amelia knew that everything they had been through brought them to this point, and that the love they found in each other was the only certainty they needed. Did you enjoy this exciting story? If this journey touched you, leave your comment. We want to know what you thought of this ending.